Hey everyone, I hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome back to another Web Dev Junkie video. So in this video, I wanted to give you a real life example of how you can reuse recursion to basically display recursive components. So looking at this application that we have here, there is a card component, and this card component basically has something called a post feed, okay? And basically it's just a way to recursively have comments displayed. So if you see here, there is a button here that when you click it, it's actually going to expand and show all the comments associated with that top level post. But then you can kind of go in further and you can comment on each of these sub comments. Okay, so if I click on this 5, you'll notice that we get more comments that drop down below. This is a recursive component because it basically is nesting identical data structures inside of it. So for example, a tree is a recursive component, and this is kind of like a tree. Okay, you have like a root node, which would be this. And then you have children, okay? So you can comment multiple times on this root node. Let me go back. And for each of those children of the root node, you can again comment on those. So I wanted to show you it's kind of important to know recursion. It's one of those things where you don't use it a lot, but if it's in something that you know and something that's in your toolbox, you won't stumble as much when you need to actually implement some type of recursive component or do some type of recursive logic to solve a problem. And just to kind of show you this, if I go to the home page, and let me just give you a quick walkthrough. This is all written in React. So we have components here. This is the home page, which has a feed card. The feed card has basically we loop over all the posts and we display a post card. So all these top level posts, if I were to collapse this comment, these cards, these are all like top level nodes, I guess you can say. And how the recursion works is basically if you include that post card component and pass it the post, it's going to recursively use itself. So if you look here down at the bottom, if it has comments, we basically create more postcards with a little bit of indentation. So this is a recursive component because it's a component called postcard that calls postcard. And then we pass it the child node, or in this case, the comment that we need to render out. And again, it's not something that you obviously use all the time, but you'll see this once in a while if you're dealing with some type of recursive data structure, such as trees. And you can use this with any type of data structure that has like nodes that are nested with more nodes, etc. Just to give you kind of a walkthrough, I mean, if you don't know recursion to begin with, typically there is a function that you have, and that function calls itself. So if you know how JSX works behind the scenes, all of your JSX is basically just transpiled into function calls, right? So this is a function, which is end up calling a function like this. This will end up getting compiled down to a function behind the scenes. And for recursion, you basically have a base case, right? So you need at a point where you can say stop doing the recursive call. And this happens to be on this map call, okay? If there's no comments on the data structure, then we no longer need to do that recursive call and display more components. So that's kind of how this all works behind the scenes. It's you can look up like a basic recursion example like Fibonacci or something, and all recursive functions basically have like a base case where you stop, and then it has like your recursive calls that keep on making the data structures or keep on making the components over and over again. So let me just give you one last example of where recursion comes into play with like web development and building out applications. So we're looking at VS Code right now. VS Code is written in Electron, which means it uses like JavaScript, HTML, CSS behind the scenes to basically style this and render out all of these different components. Now on the left, you have an Explorer, which is used for basically diving into your file system, where you can expand and collapse different folders and view files and stuff like that. It turns out that this is also a recursive data structure, okay? You have a top level node, which happens to be like your root node, or whatever directory that you have VS Code pointed to. And inside that directory, you have more subdirectories, okay, which are more children of that node. So this node has 2 children. It has images and front end, which happen to be directories, and the rest are just files. But you can expand and recursively dive into those children. So front end is probably just a child node that has multiple child components. Very similar to over here, the postcard is a comment that has multiple comments attached to it. So if you wanted to write a component where you can easily traverse and dive down into the file system using this like Explorer type of component, you need to understand recursion and how it works. So again, those are just 2 really good examples of when recursion might come into play when you're doing like web development or building out applications. But again, there's probably a lot of other ones that I haven't really discussed. It's used a lot more when you get into lower level languages. Like if you're building a library that covers JavaScript in the DOM, you're more than likely going to use some type of recursive call, because if you think about it, the DOM is just a tree. Okay, a tree is a recursive data structure, and the DOM, basically the thing that makes up all your HTML elements. So another example of recursive components or recursive data structure is the DOM. So if you know anything about JavaScript and HTML, there is the DOM here. And typically you have a top level root component, which is the HTML tag. And you can kind of dive down into the other tags. Like I can expand body to look into the body that has more divs. Those divs have nested children. Those children have nested children. Again, so this is a recursive data structure. And if you don't know recursion, it's going to be hard for you to render out this like Explorer type of view inside a web browser. So that's probably how they do it in Chrome and Firefox and other browsers. They just do a recursive call to basically render out these components dynamically. Yeah, and also if you're using like lower level JavaScript libraries, you're more than likely going to have to write some type of recursive function because you're dealing with the DOM, which means that you have to dive down into the children and into the children of those children, etc. So yeah, I just wanted to give a quick overview. I hope this kind of gives you more insight of how you can use recursion to solve different web applications, web development applications. I guess I'm curious to hear if you guys have used recursion in any of your real life applications. If you have, leave me a comment. I'm interested to hear. Also, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and also be sure to subscribe if you're new to this channel, because I'm going to have other videos like this in the future that can just kind of help you learn more about web development and become a better programmer. Cool. Have a good day. Happy coding.